All television and radio stations in the United States will now cease their regular programming.
As you can see in the 12th verse of the 3rd chapter of the first epistle of John, Cain was of that wicked one and slew his brother, afterward becoming the father of the Kenites, which means the sons of Cain, and Cain's genealogy going up to the 4 children of Lamech you'll find in Genesis chapter 4, which is a separate genealogy from Adam's because Cain wasn't Adam's son. He was the son of that wicked one, meaning that old serpent called the devil and Satan, and the Kenites are the natural branches of Satan's family tree. You could even say their 4 hidden dynasties of education, economics, politics, and religion line up with the 4 children of Lamech, meaning Jubal, who was the father of all such as handle the harp and organ, lining up with education and the technology that allows Satan's deception to be transmitted by the Kenites through the airwaves in the same way the sounds of musical instruments travel through the air. Jabal was the father of such as dwell in tents and of such as have cattle, lining up with economics obviously, followed by Tubal-Cain, an instructor of every artificer in brass and iron, as in creating weapons of war, which lines up with politics, and then Naamah, by process of elimination, lines up with religion. We know the Kenites survived the flood of Noah from Genesis 15 verse 19, with the Hivites being most likely a cross between the Kenites and the Canaanites, because remember it was the Hivites who were cursed to be hewers of wood and drawers of water for the congregation and the altar of the Lord in Joshua chapter 9. That's how they became the Nethinim you can read of in Ezra and Nehemiah, which is how they were able to infiltrate the Levitical priesthood, becoming the Pharisees Christ says the blood of righteous Abel would fall upon in Matthew chapter 23 verse 35. So either the Hivites are a cross between the Kenites and the Canaanites, or the Kenites are called Hivites in Joshua 9 by land association, the scribes being in large part Kenites also, as we know from 1 Chronicles chapter 2 verse 55, the Kenites being the generation of vipers who carry out the negative part of God's plan through their 4 hidden dynasties, which again are education, economics, politics, and religion. We're told in the last verse of Revelation 13 to count the number of the beast, which as you can see when you look up that word translated as count in the Greek dictionary of the Strong's Concordance, means to enumerate the stones worn smooth that come from the false rock, meaning Satan, who will appear as the false Christ in Jerusalem at the 6th seal, the 6th trumpet, and the 6th vial. The stones worn smooth being symbolic of the Kenites, which again means the sons of Cain, and the 4 hidden dynasties of the Kenites began to be globalized in 1830, which lines up with the hidden dynasty of education, and the hidden dynasties of economics, politics, and religion line up with 1913, 1945, and 1948, when this final generation began, which is the generation of the fig tree. 1948 being when Kenite-occupied Israel came into being, and remember it was fig leaves Adam and Eve covered themselves with after Satan impregnated Eve with Cain, which is why Christ says in Mark chapter 13 verse 28, "Now learn a parable of the fig tree, when her branch is yet tender and putteth forth leaves, not fruit, but leaves, ye know that summer is near." Summer being harvest time, which is the end of the world, as we know from Matthew chapter 13, and the serpent seed, meaning the sons of Cain, were allowed to infiltrate the priesthood, whereby Satan could then bring about Christ's crucifixion through the Kenites, fulfilling the prophecy of Genesis 3:15 that he would bruise the heel of the woman's seed, meaning the true Christ, who will crush the head of the serpent, meaning Satan, ultimately in the lake of fire when Satan gets blotted out of existence, along with all who choose to follow him at that time after the 1,000 years are finished, just before the Third World Age begins. Going back to when the 4 hidden dynasties began to be globalized, 1830 is the year Joseph Henry's foundational research on the electromagnetic telegraph dates back to, according to the Smithsonian Institutional Archives. The electromagnetic telegraph led to the telephone, radio, television, and finally the internet, whereby the seed of the mark of the beast gets planted in the foreheads of most Christians, and then at 666, when Satan appears as the Antichrist, his image, as well as the images of his angels, will be transmitted throughout the globe onto all the smartphone, computer, and television screens when the seed of the mark of the beast comes to fruition, because that's when most Christians will begin to worship Satan instead of Christ, which is what Antichrist means. 1830 also being when the rapture deception came into being that deceives Christians into believing Christ will return at any moment, setting them up for the spiritual kill at 666 when Satan appears as the Antichrist in Jerusalem. 1913 is when the Federal Reserve System came into being, lining up with the hidden dynasty of economics, followed by the World Wars and the United Nations in 1945, which lines up with the hidden dynasty of politics, and then 1948, which lines up with the hidden dynasty of religion, is again when Kenite-occupied Israel came into being, which is when this final generation began. The United Nations being the great horn of the he-goat written of in Daniel chapter 8, with the he-goat itself being symbolic of the shadow government of the Kenites worldwide, not in any one specific geographical location, and the shadow government of the Kenites is split into two warring factions, which is what nation shall rise against nation means in Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 21. In other words, the Kenite nation rising up against itself through unipolar as opposed to multipolar globalism, and it's when the great horn of the he-goat, meaning the United Nations, gets broken that the he-goat of Daniel chapter 8 becomes the leopard of Daniel chapter 7, which is symbolic of the Kenites and their four hidden dynasties, providing the infrastructure of the one world system of Revelation 13 that won't come into being until the woe of the fifth trumpet. Then it receives a deadly wound, which is what kingdom against kingdom means in Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 21, the deadly wound being most likely one or more of the countries on one of the 7 continents declaring independence from the so-called New World Order. As you can see in Daniel 11, verses 25 through 27, it'll most likely be one of the countries that are part of the lion, meaning the 4th king of the south in Daniel chapter 11, with the 4th king of the north being the bear, which is symbolic of the Ezekiel 38 confederacy, as you can see pointed out in the Daniel 11 hypothesis on biblicalresearchlabs.com. The lion being symbolic of the Christian nations up until Satan appears as the Antichrist, as you can see in Daniel 11:31, because that's when most Christians will be killed spiritually and grafted into Satan's family tree along with the Kenites, who are the natural branches thereof, and if they don't repent before the 7th angel sounds when the true Christ returns, they'll be counted as evil figs, failing to take part in the first resurrection when all are changed into spiritual bodies.
The mark of the beast is the deception that Satan is Jesus' return. The mark of the beast is the deception that Satan is Jesus' return. The mark of the beast is the deception that Satan is Jesus' return.
For 20 free magnetic business cards, email us at mark13records@mail.com.
Hey, why so sad? And this isn't the first time I've noticed it. Oh, nothing, really. Whatever it is, I've got just the cure for it.
Now on DVD, the Timelines of Revelation 2 disc set, which includes the timeline of the 7 Seals videos, as well as the timeline of the 7 Trumpets videos. Email us at mark13records@mail.com to find out how to order, or call 1-800-816-2432. Fantastic, you'll enjoy it.